Today we're making these African flowers, pentagon, hexagon, and the heptagon, the 7 petals. So we're going to be making the 6 petal one, which is the hexagon. But they're all the same ones that you're going to be using if you ever make any of those, what do you call it, the Heidi bears, stuffed animals, and all those things. They call for different number of different sizes, like, and the size, by size I mean how many petals are going around. They all start the same. You just put in a different number of pairs in the very beginning. So I'll kind of explain that as we go along, but this is the one we're going to be making, which is just the basic hexagon. And let's get started. So we're going to need a crochet hook. I'm using a 4mm and your 3 colors of yarn. You're going to be using another, if you're joining to make a Heidi Bear's animal or a blanket or anything, there's also a joining color. So there's 4 colors in total, but for your African flowers, there's the 3 colors. You can also join them in different ways, but we're going to be doing join as you go. And I'll show that in a separate video, so because it's a bit more confusing, but for now we're going to be making the flower and we'll make the edge around it. So those are the different sizes we can make. You can also make an 8 petal one, exactly the same way, except you put 8 pairs of double crochet into the center. And this one we put 7 pairs of double crochet. This one was 5 pairs of double crochet to make the pentagon. And then the hexagon is 6 pairs of double crochet into the center ring. The center ring's always the same. You just change how many pairs of double crochet you put in, and that changes how many petals you're going to make going around. So exact same pattern, you decide how many petals you want. For a hexagon, it's 6 petals. So I have my 3 colors of yarn, any kind you want. This is just regular acrylic. They call it chunky here, but who knows what it really is, sport weight or something. If you're doing a stuffed animal like the Heidi Bears, you're going to want to use a smaller hook so that the holes are smaller, so when you stuff it, your stuffing doesn't come out of all these holes. So a 4 works pretty good for the regular yarn. You can use a smaller hook, you can use smaller yarn. Or if you're doing for a blanket or something softer that you didn't want so crunchy, you can use a bigger hook. And you can see from the back, something to think about if you are doing these, you want to make a blanket or something else. I think the back side does not look as good. You can kind of see it looks a bit messy, whereas the front doesn't look messy. So that's something to think about if you're thinking on making a blanket. The back side does not look as neat. Like, you really know it's the back side. So keep that in mind as you're planning your projects. So we're going to start by making a slip knot and a chain 5. So slip knot, any which way you do your slip knots is fine, and a chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And you're going to poke your hook into the first V that you made, doesn't matter where. And I hold it open with my thumb and my ring finger, just so I can know where my center of my loop is going to be. And slip stitch to join and chain 3, 1, 2, 3. That counts as your first double crochet. And then 1 more double crochet into the center of the ring. So that also holds the ring open, and now you can let go of it. And you're going to be going over your tail as well, so hold your tail to the side and chain 1. So you're making pairs of double crochet with a chain 1 in between. So this is 1 pair, so your chain 3 counts as a double crochet and 1 double crochet, so that's a pair, so 2. We did a chain 1. You can tell if you did a chain 1 because underneath your hook there's only that 1 loop. If you hadn't done it, there would be 2 loops of yarn from finishing your double crochet. So 2 double crochets into the center of the ring. 1 and 2. Chain 1. And 2 more double crochets, 1 and 2. And I'm keeping it quite tight. I'm not working my way around because depending how many pairs of double crochets you need to work in, you run out of space in the center. So make sure you're doing them pretty close together. You can also push them back or pull them back, grab your ring and yank your stitches back. So that's 3 so far, so I'm half done. So chain 1 to get to my next pair, and 2 more double crochet. 1 and 2, and chain 1. If you're not sure of your double crochets and your stitches, there's I have other videos of my beginner series where you can catch up on that. So here's 1 pair, 2 pair, 3 pair, 4 pair. So we need 6 pairs, so 2 more. So this is going to be 1 pair, so that's 2 double crochet and a chain 1, and our last one, which is 2 double crochet and a chain 1. So this is where you're adjusting what flower you're going to be doing. If you're doing the pentagon, hexagon, heptagon, octagon, etc. 1, 2. And you can see how I'm counting. You can see the chain 1 spots in there. So that's how I'm counting. I'm counting 1 pair, 2 pairs, 3 pair, 4 pair, 5 pair, 6 pair. I did a chain 1, and now I'm going to slip stitch to the top of this initial chain 3 to join. So just slip stitch, and I'm slip stitching tightly. I don't want it to be loose. And then I'm doing a chain 1 to secure. Now we get to cut our yarn. And pull your hook and your tail out and tighten it down to secure. This back tail, we worked around it when we went around our chain 5, so this one we can cut off. That one is secure. And because I don't like working in my tails later, I'm going to work in this tail now. So we call it working in your ends as you go along. So can you see these? There's the front loop and the back loop. I don't go into the front loop, but into the back loop I push in my hook just under that one strand, and I bring my yarn through. I do this 5 times. Usually. It depends. It's not an exact science. So that's 2. So into this next stitch, just the back loop, wrap your hook and bring the yarn through. And the next little guy here, same thing. So this makes it so when you're done making your African flower, you can just cut your yarn off. You don't have to grab your needle. So that's like 4. I'm going to do 1 more just to be sure. Into the next one. So that's pretty much woven around the back posts. And my front posts are still there. I can still see where they are. So if I'm doing, like when I'm doing my crochet, I know where my stitches are. And you can still go straight into it. There's just a tiny bit of extra yarn there. You won't even notice it. But then to make sure that when I stretch, my tail doesn't come out, like I'm not going to have to trim it later, I bring it back the way it was coming from. I go back about 2 or 3 stitches. I poke my hook in from the back side, so now my hook is coming up into the front of my work, and I grab my tail and bring it back. So that pokes it back down, and now my tail's waiting in the back. When I work my way around, after I've gone over it, I can just cut that right off, and it'll be secure, and it won't be stretching here. My tail won't be coming out. So no trimming in the future either. Now my next color, because these ones I'm making a tortoise, go figure, so I'm making it kind of bright colors because the body of the tortoise is going to be a boring kind of darker green, so I'm making the shell pop. So to join my next color and where I'm joining, so you can see here is where I've woven in my tail and brought it back, so I don't want to put any extra yarn in this section here, just for bulk. So I'm going to turn it, and here's another chain 1 space. I'm going to go into the next one over, just on the other side, just so when I'm weaving in this tail, I'm weaving it in here, and it's not bulking up particularly much in one area. So into one of these chain 1 spaces, make a loop of your next color. This color is going to be your petals. So whatever color you're going to use for your petals, put the loop on your hook, bring it through, and slip stitch with both strands to join your color. Now I drop my tail, and I'm going to chain 2, 1 and 2. So when I joined that first slip stitch, I'm counting that as a stitch, and then 2 more, so this is going to count as my double crochet. If you crochet tightly or differently, you can also do a chain 3 instead of a chain 2. It ends up being basically the same, but I prefer to do it this way. So I'm going to make a little bit of a bigger loop, and just to make sure that this tail is taken care of and not going to be bothering me, I'm going to do the same thing, is put my hook into the back loop and bring the tail forward a few times. This one I don't do as much because we've put a knot right here. It's not so imperative. And then I'm just weaving it in the back post again. I'm going to get to the same stitch where I left this one, the one from the previous round, and I'm going to go 2 stitches forward or 3 stitches forward and poke my hook in from the back, grab my tail and bring it back down through. So now this one, I can cut off this one when I've gone over it as well, and it is woven in same as a needle, but you never had to touch a needle or thread a needle, which is my worst part. So now we're going to be doing sets of double crochet, so a pair of double crochet. So our chain counts as a double crochet plus 1 double crochet into the chain 1 space, chain 1, and 2 more double crochets into the same space. So we're making the bottom of the petals. So if you see on the African flower, we're doing this part here. So it's like a double V stitch into each chain 1 space going around. Okay, so we finished these 2 double crochets. We did chain 3, double crochet, chain 1, 2 double crochets. We're going straight into the next chain 1 space, so nothing in between here. And we're making 2 double crochets. Get that through. A chain 1 and 2 more double crochets. So now we're going to work our way around doing this in every chain 1 space, depending on how many pairs of double crochet you put into your ring is how many petals you're going to be making now. But other than that, it's the exact same pattern. It just varies on how many petals you're actually making. So here's 2 double crochet, chain 1, 2 double crochet into the same space. And then we go straight into the next chain 1 space, and you can drop your tails now. You don't have to be going over them like we used to, because we've woven them in. So I've done my 2 double crochet. I know I haven't done my chain 1 because I have 2 loops underneath my hook. You see those 2 loops? So that means I have not done a chain 1. So chain 1 and 1 loop under my hook, so I know I've done it. 2 more double crochet into the same space, like that, and straight into the next chain 1 space for 2 double crochet and a chain 1 and 2 double crochet. So it's like a double V stitch, I suppose, in a way. And then so I finished those 2 double crochets, chain 1, 2 double crochets into the next chain space. I'm going straight in to make 2 double crochets, a chain 1 and 2 double crochets. So the only chains are in between, like in the center of these clusters, or in the center of these pairs. In between jumping spaces, there's nothing. So my last 2 double crochet, 1 and 2, and now we're going to slip stitch to join. So I'm going to slip stitch here. I don't slip stitch to the 3rd chain like we usually do, because the 3rd chain is technically the top of our double crochet, so I'm going kind of into the 2nd. That'll like pull it up and make it not bulky on this side. Now we need to get over into this chain 1 space here. So I slip stitch into the next stitch. So I just put my hook into the stitch underneath both of those V's, bring the yarn back and slip it through. And then into this space, If you go into the space, you totally can. You can just slip stitch into the space, but you end up with a little knobby here. That little loop of yarn stays there, and you'll see it. No one else will probably see it, but you will, and I have. So this is my way of getting around that. So I'm going to slip stitch into the back post of this chain 1 to try to get it tucked in there, and then chain 3 to count as your first double crochet, and then 6 double crochet into this chain 1 space, because our chain 3 counts as a double crochet and we need clusters of 7. So this is counting as our 1, and then we'll do 6 double crochets for a total of 7. So 1 double crochet, 2, all into the same space. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, and our last one to make 7, counting our chain 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that is 7. Wrapping our yarn, going straight into the next chain 1 space, and we're going to make 7 double crochets. So nothing in between the clusters or the shells. We're just going from one to the other, 7 double crochet into each chain 1 space, going around your flower. So depending how many pairs you made in the beginning is how many of these shells you're going to be making now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Straight into the next chain 1 space. So make sure you're not going in between, because remember, this is not a chain 1 space. You need to be going into the center of where you started your petals. That's your chain 1 space. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So keep doing this all the way along till we reach back to here. So 7 double crochet into each of these spaces in the centers of your where you started your petals. Nothing in between. So this round you're only doing double crochets, nothing else. Clusters of 7, not clusters, shells of 7. So I'll meet you when you work your way around. Okay, so we have gotten all the way around. We've done our 7, and really count after you do each of these shells, really count to make sure that there's 7. Like I count to 3 on each one, 1, 2, 3, and then I eyeball 7. I do it for every shell, no matter how many I've done, because you really need it to be 7. If we're joining these later to make any sort of like animal or something that requires an actual pattern, you really need these stitches to line up. You need your stitches to be the right number, just to save yourself a lot of grief. So really count. Now at the top of this chain 3, we are going to be going straight into it because we did a chain 3 there. So I'm just going to push my hook in. I'm getting 2 loops on my hook, and I'm bringing my yarn back. I'm doing it tightly. I don't have a big loop on my hook. Oh, let me do it up here again. Hold on. So into the top of this chain 3, make sure you have 2 loops on your hook. Wrap your yarn and bring it through this one. And do it tightly. You don't want a big loop anywhere because that's just going to make your join kind of loose. So we've joined. Now we're going to do a chain 1 to make a little bit of a knot. We're going to cut our yarn. We don't need to have too much because we're going to weave it in and take it back again. So just like maybe 3 inches is fine. And pull your hook up and your tail out. And just tighten it down to secure. And before I move on, I am going to weave in this tail to the back posts. So I just put my hook in, bring the yarn back. I do it for about 5 stitches. Not that it totally matters, you can do more or less, but that seems to be what I do these days. This is 4, and this is 5. and then I go back 2 or 3. I don't take it back all the way to the beginning because I don't want extra bulk where that slip stitch is. So I go a little bit before that and just drag it to the back side. So it's ready to go around and I can see where my stitches are here. So it hasn't interfered with anything. Now we can flip it over. These two we can cut off because we have worked them in. Oh, these scissors are terrible. I bought them because of the color, just at the grocery store, but they are dull as like fish bones, like they're horrible. But they're here, so what do? Now we're going to do our last round, which is single crochet with deep double crochets. These ones poke down straight right on top of this circle. So other than that, it's pretty straightforward, not too tricky. Oh, my yarn is being difficult. Okay. So now to join these ones, we've done our weaving in of our tail and slip stitching here. So we wove in our tail to this part here. So I don't want to join on this petal just because I don't want the extra bulk of the yarn. So the one before, I'm going to do it the one before. In between our two petals, if you pull your work a little bit, you can kind of see, I hope, you can kind of see, there's two, like they look like little eyeballs to me. Like I can see one here and one there in the middle there. Can you see those two? Here and here. So I'm joining into this one. I'm right-handed, so this is my left eyeball, or I call it the left eyeball, or if you can see those two, this one and this one. So I go into the left one. If you are watching this for a left-handed video, this is the right one, so go into this one. And I always join there. It just makes sense. It makes counting easier in the future. Put a loop of your new color onto your hook and pull it through and slip stitch with both strands to join. Drop your tail to the side and chain 1. Now sometimes I just actually go over this because we're doing single crochet, so it's pretty tight. It's not a loose stitch, but for demonstration purposes and to be proper about it, I drop my working yarn and grab my tail. I'm just going to work this one through these back posts. I haven't put my work down, my loop, I'm still ready to get going with my loop on my hook, so I'm just doing small little poking it in with my hook and dragging it through just to loop it around here a bit. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to bring it back forward. Just so if my work gets stretched, my tail's not going to come through and annoy me in the future. It's not going to need a haircut. Okay, so just like that. And you can still see all my stitches are lined up nice in the front. And when I work around this, I can cut my tail. So I've slip stitched to join, and I've done a chain 1. Just up like that. That's going to count as our first single crochet. Now into the next stitch, I'm going straight underneath both of the V's, just like regular, making a single crochet. And we're making, each of the tops of these petals gets 7 single crochets. So that the chain 1 and the slip stitch in chain 1 counts as 1. This is our number 2. So then 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And again, this 7, it's an important number. You gotta make sure you have 7. Now we're into this space here, so we're gonna make a double crochet. So wrap your yarn and poke your hook right down on top in this little space on top of the center circle, right where you started. So you're going not here and not, you're going right underneath both rounds. So that's going to pull up your petal and give you some definition. So you're going to do a double crochet. You don't have to do it really tight. You don't have to do it really loose. Just try it. You'll see it works out. It'll even out. It's a bit stressful the first time you try it, but it works out. Now pull this double crochet back because you have to see this little stitch here. That's your first single crochet into that V there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So we're back into the center. Wrap your yarn, go down, just touching the top of this. You're not going into the circle or into any of this blue yarn or whatever your center color is, but just this space right on top of it. Just there. So poke your hook in and grab your yarn, bring it back, wrap your yarn, take off 2, wrap your yarn and take off 2. So that's your double crochet. Now this part is the tricky one, is we have to get 7 single crochet into the top of this petal, same as the rest of the petals, but we started with our chain 3 here, so it looks a bit different. And we have, how I do it, I count back. So I start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I know I have to get 6 and 7 into here. So I go into this, the top of the chain 3, just with a single crochet, and then I pick these 2 little guys together and make that into a stitch for my second single crochet. So I just push my hook in and do 1 single crochet, and then into each stitch going all the way around to finish my 7 of this petal, like this. And in between the petals we do our long double crochet down into the middle, like this, and we just keep going all the way around. So that's the only tricky part, is making stitches for the chain 3, and remember to pull your stitches back to find this very first double crochet to make the single crochet. You have to find that very first stitch of every petal. It kind of hides underneath the double crochet. So pull a double crochet to the side, take a look for it, because every stitch needs a single crochet plus the double crochet. The double crochet does not count as one of your 7. So I finished this one. I'm doing my double crochet and then pulling my double crochet back, I see this first one here. So that's my first of the 7. So keep going around and I'll meet you at the end. There, I finished my 7 and I'm ready to do my last double crochet. So there's my last double crochet, and I'm going to slip stitch to the top of this chain. Now there's no perfect place to slip stitch. I've gone past it, into it, underneath it. It always is going to kind of look a little bit different. So I just go into the fat part here. I make sure I get at least 2 strands onto my hook and then just slip stitch to join. And that's my slip stitch, and I do a chain 1 to make my little bit of a knot. Cut your yarn, pull your hook and tail up, and tighten it down a little bit. Now before I do anything else, I'm going to work in that tail. So I'm going to take my tail and bring it forward. Now after the first one, I give it a bit of a pull to make it flat here. Give it a bit of a pull, and then into each of the next, say 5 stitches, 4 or 5, I just loop it into the back post. Just working it around slowly. And about like that, I think that was about 4, and I'll go back about 2. I'll put my hook in from the back side, so my hook's sticking up, grab my yarn and bring it back to the back side. So now when I go around it, I know it's behind, it's not in my way, and I can see all of my stitches. So now you can flip it over and you can cut your petal color. Finish with that, if your scissors cut ever. I better just get a different pair. And then this one here, that one we can cut also. So there we are. Now we are ready to do our outside our row of double crochet. If you are doing join as you go to join your flowers into a particular pattern, an animal or a handbag or like something where you're doing join as you go, you'll just leave them like this and you will do your final round, your double crochet as you're joining. I'm also going to be doing that, but I can also show you how to not be doing that, because You even start your join as you go by putting a full, you finish one of your hexagons or African flowers first. So all the way around for joining, we're going to be doing all the way around, we're going to be doing a row of double crochet. That's how you're going to start your join as you go. And also if you're going to sew them together with your tail or with a different color or whatever you want to do, you can also just finish them all how we're doing now. But if you're doing join as you go, you're just going to be doing your first African flower like this and then joining the second one and the third, etc., etc. So now we have to decide where to join our joining color. I'm going to be using this darker green, this olive, for my tortoise, which is what it's going to be eventually. So we did our slip stitch and our join on this side, so we don't want any extra yarn here. And I don't really want to go here because it's so close to that, so I'm going to go on to this one here. Now where I start is my 4th single crochet. So this is my double crochet here. Let me see. This is my double crochet, so I go 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this is my 4th single crochet. It's also pretty much the top of your petal, but because it's 7, it's a bit different. So anyway, that's my fourth single crochet from the double crochet. That's where I'm going to start. So you put your loop of yarn onto your hook, same as we have been joining before. Slip stitch to join. Drop your tail and chain 2, 1 and 2. So that's going to count as our first double crochet. Now you can do the same. You can weave in your tail a little bit if you're happy with doing that. I'll just do a little bit. Then you know that it is going to not fall apart and your ends are not going to wiggle out at you and need a haircut, which is also very annoying. So now my tail's finished. I can cut that off when I'm done. So this chain 3, the slip stitch in chain 2 counts as a chain 3, which counts as a double crochet. Into the next stitch, we're going to be doing double crochet. So we're making this row, every side of our African flowers has 9 double crochets on it. So 1, 2, 3. I'm just going into each single crochet and making a double crochet. 5, I think 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So before we were counting 7s and now we count 9s. So our chain counts as 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Into the 9th stitch, and sometimes it's going to look like it's a bit on the right or a bit on the left. It doesn't matter. All that matters is you have your 9. You really need 9. That's all you need. So you're going to chain 1 for your corner and do 1 more double crochet into the exact same stitch. So this counts as your first double crochet for the next side. You see how we've just turned our work. So along this side, we're going into each single crochet and making, well, into each stitch, including the double crochet, and making a double crochet. So I'm going into each stitch, under both loops of each stitch, including the extra spot where we wrapped our yarn. So now we're at where we did our slip stitch. We've joined here. So this part I do something a little different also, because we do have a slip stitch. It's kind of a bigger knot there, and I don't want to look at it. I don't want to see it on my finished piece. So I'm going to do a double crochet just underneath it to kind of pinch it up. So I just push my hook in. It's not pretty. You literally force your hook in and do a double crochet straight underneath that. So now you can't see that big knot that was there. It's hidden. And now we skip this spot because I forced it underneath that knot. Can you see? So my next one is going to be here, underneath that actual stitch. So it's a bit of a jump because I did force that one early, so now, but now we're finished. That was the only tricky part of the whole round. So now we count our 9. So from the corner, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So one more is 9. And this is going to be with a chain 1 and another double crochet because that's going to be our corner. Every 9th stitch is a double crochet, is a chain 1 and a double crochet to make a corner. So we're doing that in every 9th stitch. So this counts as our next 1, our number 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And we'll just count again to make sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So chain 1 and another double crochet into the same stitch. That turns our corner. And you can see our flower is laying quite flat now. It's not as wobbly and curled up as they used to be. They go really nice and flat now. So that's our number 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, oops, my yarn split there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So we'll just count again. And I do count, I'm not just counting for the video, I do count every side. Because when you're joining, if you're off, it's so frustrating because you're not sure where the mistake was. You're not sure which piece you have to fix or where you're supposed to put the extra stitch or if it's going to mess up the next side you're joining. So it's really important to keep track of your 7s down in here and your 9s when you get to here. Then when you're joining, you don't have to think about anything. You're like, everything's just going to go together. So chain 1 and another double crochet into the same spot. And then 1 into each stitch going along. So just keep doing this all the way along. You'll have more sides to do if you're doing an octagon or a heptagon, or less if you're doing a pentagon. So just keep going. I'll meet you at the end to join. So I've reached my last stitch, but now just go back and count as usual. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So remember our 9 is going to be in the same stitch as our number 1. So into the same stitch we make a double crochet, chain 1, and you're going to slip stitch to the top of that chain to join. Slip stitch and then chain 1 to secure your work. Cut your tail. Pull your hook up and your yarn out, tighten it down to secure. Now before you get going anywhere, get this tail woven in a bit so you don't have to worry about that one later either. So just into the back loop, bring your yarn through a few times. And in the beginning I do pull it to get it a bit flat. I want that knot to be to that chain 1 to lay down straight. And you can't really pull it after because you've got so much, it's twisted up in here already, so it's not moving. It's already quite secure. So there I did about 5, and I'm going to go back a couple and just pull it to the back side. So that is your first hexagon, including your joining edge. You can flip it over. Now the only one you can't cut is the one on the very outside, the last one we did. So don't cut that, but you can cut all the other ones, and you don't have any tails, no darning, no sewing in your ends. So that is how to make an African hexagon. Now for joining, I'll be making a separate video shortly to show you how to join on from here. So your choice is either to leave them like this and then join as you go, or you can make them all like this, leave a longer tail, and you can even sew it in with your tail or sew them together with your tail. It depends what you want to do. For this video, we're going to be doing join as you go in part 2. So get your hexagons ready, or your pentagons, or whatever you're working on, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Stay hooked.